Welcome to the English learning community, hey everyone, and welcome back to another exciting episode. Today, we're diving into something truly special, a story that's not just going to improve your listening and writing skills, but also inspire you to take your English to the next level. So, grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and let's get started. Have you ever been in a situation where someone was speaking and you just couldn't catch everything they said? Or maybe you were trying to write something, an email, a message, or even a story, but the words just wouldn't come to you. Trust me, we've all been there. But here's the good news. Today's episode is designed to help you overcome those challenges. We're going to explore real-life stories and examples that show you exactly how English is used in everyday conversations. These stories are packed with practical vocabulary, natural sentence structures, and tips that will boost your confidence and fluency. By the end of this episode, you'll not only understand English better, but also feel more comfortable using it in your own life. But before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a few questions. These are meant to get you thinking and set the stage for what's coming next. So, as you listen to today's episode, keep these questions in mind. 1. Have you ever felt nervous about speaking English because you were afraid of making mistakes? 2. What's one situation where you struggled to understand someone speaking English? 3. When you write in English, do you sometimes feel like you're missing the right words? These questions are more than just food for thought. They're the foundation of what we're about to explore. The story you're going to hear today is all about overcoming fear, embracing mistakes, and finding the courage to keep going. It's about real people, real challenges, and real growth. And trust me, by the end of it, you'll feel inspired to take on your own English learning journey with a fresh perspective. So, are you ready? Let's jump into today's story and discover how mistakes can actually be magic in disguise. Let's go. The power of small steps, how one conversation changed everything. The silent dreamer. In a quiet town in Mexico, there lived a young man named Carlos. Carlos was kind, hardworking, and had a big dream. He wanted to become a tour guide and show people the beauty of his country. But there was one problem. Carlos was terrified of speaking English. Every time he tried, his mind would flood with thoughts like, what if I say the wrong word? What if people laugh at me? What if I sound stupid? Because of this, Carlos would often stay silent, even when tourists asked him for directions. He felt like his dream was slipping away because of his fear. The missed opportunity. One day, a group of American tourists visited Carlos's town. They were looking for someone to guide them to the famous ancient ruins nearby. Carlos knew the way perfectly, but when they asked him in English, "Can you help us?" he froze. His mind raced. Should I say yes or sí? What if I can't explain the history? What if they don't understand me? After a long pause, Carlos just pointed in the direction of the ruins and said, "That way." The tourists thanked him and walked away. Carlos felt a deep sense of regret. He thought, I could have shown them the way. I could have shared my knowledge. Why am I so afraid? Shaki sakes ein, toying my rains tight. That night, Carlos couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the tourists and his dream of becoming a tour guide. He felt like his fear was a wall between him and his future. The next morning, Carlos decided to visit his older sister, Isabella, who worked as a teacher. Isabella was wise and always knew how to cheer him up. When Carlos told her about his fear, she listened carefully and said, "Carlos, you don't have to be perfect to start. You just have to start to get better." Carlos looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" Isabella smiled and said, "Start small. Talk to one tourist, just one sentence. Don't think about the rest. Small steps lead to big changes." The first step. Carlos decided to take Isabella's advice. He went to the town square where tourists often gathered. he saw a young woman taking pictures of the church. She looked friendly, so he took a deep breath and walked up to her. He said, "Hello, do you need help?" The woman smiled and said, "Yes. Can you tell me about this church?" Carlos felt nervous, but he remembered Isabella's words. Small steps. He said, "This church is very old. It has beautiful windows." The woman nodded and said, "Thank you. It's stunning." Carlos felt a rush of happiness. He had done it. He had spoken to a tourist in English. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Life lesson. Carlos learned that you don't have to be perfect to start. The first step is always the hardest, but once you take it, the rest becomes easier. Building confidence. After his first small step, Carlos felt a tiny spark of confidence. He realized that speaking English wasn't as scary as he thought, but he also knew he had a long way to go. He decided to take Isabella's advice and keep taking small steps. The next day, Carlos went back to the town square. This time, he saw an elderly couple looking at a map. They seemed confused, so Carlos walked up to them and said, "Hello, can I help you?" The man smiled and said, "Yes, please. We're looking for the market." Carlos thought for a moment and said, "Go straight, then turn left." The market is big and colorful. The couple thanked him and said, "You're very kind. Thank you for your help." Carlos felt proud of himself. He had helped someone, and they appreciated it. He realized that people don't care about small mistakes. They care about kindness and effort. The funny moment. A few days later, Carlos had a funny moment that made him laugh at himself. He saw a group of tourists taking pictures near the fountain. He wanted to say, "Would you like me to take a picture for you?" But instead, he said, "Would you like me to take you with the picture?" The tourists looked confused for a moment, then burst out laughing. One of them said, "Do you mean take a picture of us?" Carlos's face turned red, but he laughed too. He said, "Yes, that's what I meant. Sorry, my English is a work in progress." The tourist smiled and said, "No problem. We understood you. Thank you for offering." This funny moment taught Carlos that mistakes can be funny and that people are usually understanding. It's all about having a good attitude. The first big challenge. One day, Carlos heard about a local tour guide training program. The program would teach him how to guide tourists and improve his English. But there was one problem. The final exam was a live tour in English. Carlos felt nervous. He thought, what if I can't explain the history? What if I forget the words? But then he remembered Isabella's words. Small steps lead to big changes. He decided to apply for the program. The training program. The training program was challenging but fun. Carlos learned about the history of his town, practiced his English, and even did mock tours with his classmates. At first, he was shy and made many mistakes, but his teacher, Mr. Gonzalez, encouraged him. Mr. Gonzalez said, "Carlos, you have a passion for this. Don't let fear hold you back. Remember, fluency is not about perfection, it's about communication." Those words gave Carlos the courage to keep trying. He practiced every day, even if it was just talking to his dog in English. The life lesson. Carlos learned that practice makes progress. The more he spoke, the more confident he became. He also learned that mistakes are part of the learning process. Every mistake was a step toward improvement. Carlos had been working hard in the tour guide training program. He had learned about the history of his town, practiced his English, and even guided a few small groups of tourists. But now, the day of the final exam had arrived. The exam was simple, but scary. Carlos had to guide a group of tourists on a live tour of the ancient ruins. He would be graded on his knowledge, his English, and his ability to connect with the group. Carlos felt nervous. He thought, what if I forget the history? What if I can't answer their questions? What if they don't understand me? But then he remembered Isabella's words. Small steps lead to big changes. He took a deep breath and told himself, I don't have to be perfect. I just have to try. The tour begins. The group of tourists arrived, a family of 4 from the United States. They smiled at Carlos and said, Hi, we're excited to learn about the ruins. Carlos smiled back and said, Welcome, I'm Carlos, and I'll be your guide today. At first, Carlos's voice was shaky, but as he started talking, he began to relax. He pointed to the ruins and said, This place is very old. It was built by the Maya people more than 1,000 years ago. The family listened carefully and asked questions like, What was this building used for? How did the Maya people live? Why did they leave this place? Carlos answered as best as he could. He made a few mistakes, but he didn't let them bother him. He just kept talking and sharing his knowledge. The funny moment. During the tour, Carlos had a funny moment that made everyone laugh. He wanted to say, the Maya people were very advanced in astronomy, but instead he said, the Maya people were very advanced in astrology. One of the tourists, a teenage boy, laughed and said, Do you mean astronomy? Astrology is about horoscopes. Carlos's face turned red, but he laughed too. He said, Yes, I mean astronomy. Sorry, my English is still learning. The family smiled and said, No problem. We understood you. You're doing great. This funny moment reminded Carlos that mistakes can be funny, and that people are usually understanding. It's all about having a good attitude. The heartwarming moment. At the end of the tour, the family thanked Carlos and said, You were amazing. We learned so much from you. Carlos felt a deep sense of pride. He had faced his fear and done his best. He realized that confidence comes from action, not from thinking. A few days later, Carlos received his results. He had passed the exam with flying colors. Mr. Gonzalez called him and said, Carlos, you did an excellent job. Your passion and effort shone through. Congratulations! Carlos couldn't believe it. He had done it. He had taken small steps, faced his fears, and achieved his dream. The life lesson. Carlos learned that success is not about being perfect. It's about trying your best. He also learned that every small step you take brings you closer to your dreams. Difficult words, broken down. One ancient, very old from a long time ago. Example, the ancient ruins were built more than 1,000 years ago. 2. Astronomy. The study of stars, planets, and space. Example, the Maya people were very advanced in astronomy. 3. Astrology. The study of horoscopes and how stars affect people's lives. Example, astrology is different from astronomy. 4. Confidence, believing in yourself and your abilities. Example, Carlos felt confidence after passing the exam. 5. Effort, trying hard to do something. Example, Carlos's effort helped him succeed. The dream comes true. After passing the tour guide training program, Carlos felt like he was on top of the world. He had faced his fears, worked hard, and achieved his dream. But little did he know, an even bigger opportunity was waiting for him. One day, Carlos received a call from Mr. Gonzalez. He said, Carlos, I have some exciting news. A famous travel blogger is visiting our town, and she's looking for a local guide to show her around. I recommended you. Carlos felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. A famous travel blogger? What if he made mistakes? What if she didn't like his guiding style? But then he remembered Isabella's words. Small steps lead to big changes. He took a deep breath and said, Allow, I'd love to do it. Meeting the blogger. The next day, Carlos met the travel blogger Emily at the town square. Emily was friendly and full of energy. She smiled and said, "Lol, hi, Carlos. I've heard great things about you. I'm excited to explore the town with you." Carlos smiled back and said, "Hi, Emily. Welcome to our town. I'm excited to show you around." As they walked through the town, Carlos shared stories about the history, culture, and traditions. He made a few mistakes, but Emily didn't seem to mind. She was more interested in his passion and knowledge. The funny moment. At one point, Emily asked, "What's your favorite local dish?" Carlos wanted to say, "Tacos al pastor," but instead, he said, "Tacos al doctor." Emily laughed and said, "Tacos al doctor? Do they cure you?" Carlos laughed too and said, No, I mean tacos al pastor. They're made with pork and pineapple. They're delicious." Emily smiled and said, "I can't wait to try them." This funny moment reminded Carlos that mistakes can be funny and that people appreciate your effort to connect, even if you're not perfect. The heartwarming moment. At the end of the tour, Emily said, "Carlos, you're amazing. You have so much passion for your town, and it shows. I'm going to write all about you in my blog." Carlos felt a deep sense of pride. He had faced his fear and done his best. He realized that confidence comes from action, not from thinking. The surprise twist. A few weeks later, Carlos received a message from Emily. She had written a blog post about her visit to the town, and it had gone viral. Thousands of people were reading about Carlos and his town. But that wasn't all. Emily had also recommended Carlos to a travel TV show. They wanted him to be a guest on their show and share his stories with the world. Carlos couldn't believe it. He had gone from being a silent dreamer to a confident guide and storyteller. The final scene. The day of the TV show arrived. Carlos stood in front of the camera, feeling nervous but excited. The host asked him, "Carlos, what's your advice for someone who wants to follow their dreams?" Carlos smiled and said, "Start small. Take one step at a time. Don't let fear hold you back. And remember, mistakes are just part of the journey. The more you try, the closer you get to your dreams." The audience clapped, and Carlos felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had found his voice and shared it with the world. The life lesson. Carlos learned that success is not about being perfect. It's about trying your best. He also learned that every small step you take brings you closer to your dreams. If you enjoyed today's story and found it helpful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We've got so many more inspiring stories, practical tips, and fun lessons coming your way to help you master English and boost your confidence. And hey, if you're feeling extra motivated, leave a comment below and tell us, what's one mistake you've made while learning English, and what did you learn from it? We'd love to hear your stories and cheer you on. Thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, every step you take is progress, and we're here to support you every step of the way. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep believing in yourself. You've got this.